Hi there. My name is Christopher Harrison. I'm a senior program manager at Microsoft and geek trainer basically everywhere on social media. And what I want to talk about today is one of the most common scenarios that we see with students who are getting in and creating an application that they're going to start hacking on. And that is that they're going to incorporate some level of AI and or ML and put a web front end onto that. And so in order to complete that type of a project, there's really two main moving parts. There's obviously the AI component, or maybe the ML component if you're going to be building something on your own, and the web app. And so what I want to highlight is a couple of tools that are available to you inside of Azure to help get you up and running quickly with this type of an application, with this type of scenario. Now, the specific scenario that I'm going to work through is where I'm going to work with an application that will allow me to upload a picture of a sign that has some text on it and have that text displayed out, so incorporate OCR or optical character recognition. So let's start off by talking about how we're going to get the AI into our application. Now in Azure, we have two main options for working with AI or artificial intelligence. And the first is going to be taking advantage of pre-built AI in the form of Azure Cognitive Services. The great advantage of using pre-built AI, first of all, is the fact that we don't have to build it. Second of all, the fact that we can take advantage of models that have been built by experts, that the people who are going in and creating these models, this is basically all that they do. They live, sleep, eat, breathe this stuff. And that's really it. And I get to take advantage of their hard work. And lastly, we're able to incorporate those services through the use of an SDK if I'm using a language like Python or Node or Java or C#, or if maybe I'm using some application that doesn't have access to that, I can still call these services by making REST calls. So the too long didn't read TLDR on all of this is the fact that I can incorporate cognitive services into any application that I'm building. Now, if you realize, hey, there isn't a service that's available for me that's going to do quite what I need it to do, well, don't worry. We can still support you on Azure. That you can create your own custom AI, your own custom machine learning models through the use of a handful of different tools that we have ML Studio, which will give you some level of a GUI to help walk you through everything. And we can even scale all the way up so that we've got a fantastic virtual machine with a GPU and everything else that you could go ahead, create an instance of, and start using that to set up your machine learning model. So don't fret if you want to go off and build your own. Azure can still support you. But if you are going to take advantage of existing services, well, then we've got a whole host that are available to you. We have vision services that could go in and do, in our example, optical character recognition, or maybe spot objects inside of a picture. We have search components, which would allow us to take advantage of the services inside of Bing, such as Map, Visual Search, Auto Suggest. We have a whole decision tree which can go in and do things, for example, like detect anomalies. So maybe I have a device that's running 24/7 and I need to be alerted when I need to take that offline for maintenance. Anomaly detector could help me out with exactly that scenario. We have a whole host of language services available, including NLP through the use of Lewis, language understanding. We have text translation. We also have text analytics, where I could do things like sentiment analysis and figure out what the topic might be. We have a host of speech services to do things like speaker recognition, text-to-speech, or speech-to-text. And we're also constantly developing new services as well inside of our Cognitive Services Lab. If you want to explore the cognitive services that are available, you can head to microsoft.com/cognitive-services, where you can walk through a website that will show you all the services that are available. And one of the things that I really like is, for example, if I go into Vision and I go into Computer Vision, is that a lot of these will have a pre-baked UI that I can use to explore the service, maybe just test it out, see if it works the way that I expect it to work, maybe upload a few test images, things like that. So you can explore all the cognitive services by going to Microsoft.com/cognitive-services. Let's turn our attention to the website. Now, whenever we're setting up a website, there's typically a handful of different moving parts that I need to be aware of. For example, there's oftentimes going to be a database. In our case, we're actually not going to be using one, but it's very common in a web application, of course, to have some form of a data store. So I'll need to set that up. I'll also need to indicate the runtime that we're going to be using, be it maybe Node, or in my case, Python or PHP. We're going to need to set up our cognitive services. We're going to need to set up our AI. And then we're also going to need to get all of the locations and credentials and everything else that we're going to need. And this is where this neat little command line utility called AZ-HackCreate comes into play. AZ-HackCreate, through one line in the Azure CLI, the Azure command line interface, I can create and provision web space, a database, enable cognitive services, and very quickly see all the values that I'm going to need to be able to plug into my application to make sure that everything works correctly. What's also really nice about this utility is the fact that it will store all of those values inside of the settings for my web app, which will then become available inside of environmental variables. So what that means is that I don't have to hard code in all of those values and then maybe upload that into GitHub. And so now my passwords are exposed out on GitHub, which is never a good thing. Instead, I can read them in like normal environmental variables. So the little example command that I have up here is going to create an application that's going to be called sign demo. This will actually append on a few random characters at the end just to make sure that it's going to be unique. So that way it will successfully run for me. My runtime here, so this is going to be Python. My database, so this is going to be MySQL. I'm going to enable AI, cognitive services. I'm going to place everything into West US 2, so this is one of the Azure regions. You can go peruse all the other ones that are available. And then last but not least is I'm going to specify the output as YAML. Now, that's actually not going to make a difference in how this runs behind the scenes, but it's just going to make it a little bit easier for me to grab the values that I want to be able to properly update my application. Now, if you're anything like me, and I know I am, you really just want to see how all of this works. So let's get in and let's take a look at a demo. Let's start creating the necessary resources inside of Azure. To help me out, I'm going to use the Cloud Shell, which I can access in the upper right-hand corner inside of the Azure portal. Now, when I click on this in my case, it's going to set up the Cloud Shell for me just like that. In your case, if this is the first time that you're accessing it, you're also going to notice a little prompt that says, hey, we need to create a little storage account for you. That's going to store, among other things, the extension that we're going to add in, miscellaneous settings, etc. Not going to be a lot of information that's ever going to wind up storing, but it just needs to be put somewhere, and that's why it prompts you about that bit of cloud storage that it's going to be setting up for you inside of Azure. Now, I want to take advantage of that hack extension that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to do that by adding in the extension by saying AZ extension, add, name, and then hack. And this will go ahead and download and install the extension for me. Now you'll notice that it does tell me that it's in preview. That's fine. Everything will still work just fine. Like I highlighted before, we'll run this command by saying AZ-HackCreate. We'll specify a name, and I'm going to call this sign demo. And again, keep in mind, that will append on some random characters at the end here, and that's perfectly good. That will help ensure that this is going to be unique. I'm going to specify a runtime of Python. I'm going to specify a database of MySQL, if I can spell all of that correctly. And I'm going to enable cognitive services by using --AI. Last but not least is going to be that output of YAML. And again, like I highlighted before, that's not actually going to change how this will run, but rather set up the display so that it will output correctly for me. Oh, whoops, I forgot location. West US 2. Okay. Now let's go ahead and run this. Now this is going to take it a couple of moments because it's going to be creating an awful lot of resources behind the scenes. We can see that it's setting up cognitive services. We can see that it's creating a database for me, that it's setting up app services, etc. It's going to take a few minutes. Fortunately though, with the magic of video editing, you're going to notice this will be done in just a few seconds. Of course, when you run this on your own, it'll go in real time. Voila, just like that, this is done. So let's take a look at everything that was created. And I'm going to start from the bottom and work our way up. So what we're going to notice is there is the URL of the website. As promised, it did append on a few different characters, again, just to make sure that this will run correctly. We can also see the information for the database and for cognitive services. And again, that's going to be our implementation of AI. And we'll see where we can set up those values behind the scenes. Speaking of setting up those values behind the scenes, it's worth highlighting one more time the fact that this will have set all of that up as settings for our web app, which we'll be able to access by using environmental variables. So that way we don't hard code in those values, but rather we read them in at runtime. And that way, again, we're not going to wind up publishing out passwords, clear text on a GitHub. Again, that's a bad idea. We don't want to do that. So let's follow some best practices here, and that's again what I'm going to highlight. The last thing that I want to point out is how we can now deploy our code into our website. And this is set up by using a little thing known as git deploy. In a nutshell, git deploy allows us to add in our instance of app services as a git remote. We can see that right there. So we can add this in as a git remote, and then later we can actually just push this up into our website just as we would push this up into, say, GitHub. And so all the steps that you need are actually right there. If you're curious about how git deploy works, if you're curious about how Git works, there's a slide coming up with some resources that should hopefully help you out through all of this. Now, I do want to go in and see what was created behind the scenes because there is going to be one last piece of information that I'm going to need. So I'm going to go into my resource groups and I'm going to scroll down. There's that little sign demo that was just created. I'm going to click on that, and you're going to let me scroll down? No, you're going to make me resize that. Not a problem. Okay. So now you're going to see there's our app service plan. That's basically our VM for our website. There's cognitive services. There's the database. And then finally, there's the website. And so if I open this up and I go into configuration, I can see all of the key value pairs that were set up for me behind the scenes. So you'll notice, for example, there is that key to access cognitive services. And again, we'll be accessing this just like we would a normal environmental variable. I also want to go to our deployment center. This is going to highlight the fact that our git deploy has been set up. And if I click on deployment credentials, once this becomes available, we'll give this just another moment here. So if I click on this, there is the username and password, and we'll be using that in just a few moments. Now, I'm not going to actually write out all the code manually, but instead, I'm going to pull this down from a repository that I've created. So let me just copy that, and then I'm going to say git clone, and then paste in that URL. And this will just create a local copy of all of that code. That code is going to be available to you if you want to go back and use this on your own. There it all is. Feel free to go ahead and fork this and play with it and do whatever it is that, that you might want. Now I'm going to open this up inside Visual Studio Code by saying code dot after I change directories. And I'm going to use Visual Studio Code as my editor. Now, you can actually use whatever editor it is that you want. I personally like Visual Studio Code, so this is what I'm going to use. Now, let's start exploring the application. And if I open up app.py, the first thing that you're going to notice is I get all of these yellow squigglies. Yes, that is in fact the technical term, yellow squigglies. And what this is trying to tell me is, hey, I don't know, for example, what Flask is or what .env is or anything like that. And the reason for that is because we've yet to install all of the packages that we're going to be using in the folder where that virtual environment is going to be set up. I'm going to turn this on by saying vemv scripts activate. And then I'm going to perform the installation by using pip, which is our package manager, by saying pip install r and then requirements.txt. And this will download and install all those packages and put this into a folder that I can then use. And I get an error message about needing to upgrade pip. That's just fine. I'm not going to worry too much about that. It's now downloaded and set all of that up for me. Fantastic. So now when I go back to VS Code, it says, hey, you created a brand new virtual environment. Do you want to use that? I'm going to say yes. And now I can go ahead and start writing my code with VS Code knowing what's going on. So up at the very top, I've got a few little helper imports here that I'm going to be using. Then I've got my import in of Flask. And Flask is what we're going to be using as our web app. I then have .env. .env is what we're going to use to automatically read in those key value pairs. Then again, I don't want to hard code this in. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new file here that I'm going to call .env and set this up with the key value pairs that were created earlier. And just go back to the Azure portal here. There's the Cog Services client URL and the key. I'm just going to copy that, Control-C, paste that over here, and just do a little bit of cleanup because it wants equal signs as opposed to colons and spaces. There we go. Cool. And so now, as long as I keep that inside of my git ignore, you'll notice right there, .env. Now that's not going to be pushed up. That's just going to remain right here on my computer. So now this is going to be safe. Obviously, if you want to truly secure this, you could go in and encrypt it and so forth. But for purposes of our little sample, this is actually going to be just fine. So now let's go back over to our app.py and we can see those values being read in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new instance of the Vision client. Now, the Vision client is the SDK that we're going to be using to perform the OCR. And we create this by first setting up some credentials. That's where we're going to use that key from up above here and that endpoint. And again, both of those values are inside of our .env. Now I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to focus in on really the important part of this application, which is really this one line of code right here. What that one line of code will do is it will, like the name implies, recognize printed text. It will convert printed text in an image into simply text. And so what I can do is I can actually read the file that's been uploaded and then send that up into Cognitive Services by calling that little function right here. Now the rest of the code down below that is going to walk through all the regions of text inside the image. It's going to find every single line, and then it's going to go through every word that was found and just append them together with spaces. So really all that we're doing is just setting up a friendlier display of the text that was found on the image. Now, if you want to go back and kind of read up on everything else, it's all commented right there, so you can kind of peruse what's going on with Flask and so forth. My goal here is not to highlight Flask, but really to highlight Cog Services, or really actually just to highlight that line right there. That in that one line of code, I now am able to perform optical character recognition. So let's go ahead and run my app, shall we? Let's see this run locally. So I'm going to say Flask run and hit enter. And so now this will go ahead and start my application. Let me go back to my browser here, and I'm going to say localhost 5000, and I'm now going to be presented with this little website. I'm going to click upload photo, and I'm going to navigate into my little sign reading, and I'm going to open up that sample.jpg. It's a little picture of an image that says chance. I'm going to click open and give this just a moment, and voila, I can see both the image and I can see the text displayed. That's pretty cool. But now what I want to do is I want to take this and push this up into Azure. So let me stop the website from running locally, and let's add in that remote. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to come right back over here to that command shell that we had earlier, and let's copy out the commands. You'll notice right here it says get remote add, and then that URL. So let me copy that, and let me paste that in. Poof. And now let me go ahead and perform the push. So we'll just go ahead and copy that. And again, we'll paste this. And now it's going to prompt me for my username and password. So let me retrieve that. Come back over here. There's that username and password from before. So let me copy this. Paste that in. Let me copy that. Paste that in. And hit OK. And now this will go ahead and perform that push. So again, I found that credential back over here inside my web app, Deployment Center, deployment credentials right up there. There's the username, and there is the password. Now, what's happening behind the scenes here is it's actually setting up a virtual environment for me, and we're going to notice in just a moment here, after it's done upgrading pip, that it's going to install everything that we listed inside of that requirements.txt file. Because it's basically never that you're ever going to be creating an application that doesn't use any packages. So as long as we list them inside of requirements.txt for Python, or say package.json for Node, when we do this deployment, it will automatically perform that installation. And just like that, it's now deployed our code, and we can start using this. So let me actually just bounce back over here, and I'm going to scroll down. There is the website URL. I'm just going to click on that. It will open this up inside of a new tab, and there is our application running inside of Azure. So I'll click on Upload Photo. I'll choose the sample one more time, hit open, and voila, there is our image uploaded. Pretty slick. And so what we did here, what we saw here, is how we can set up web space, a database, and cognitive services inside of Azure, how we can update our application to now use it, And then finally, how we can deploy all of this out, which is, I think, pretty slick that we were able to do that. Now that we've seen our application, the last question then becomes, well, what's next? Where do we go from here? Well, we have a repository with a whole bunch of helpful links and resources and so forth that you can check out at aka.ms/hackwithazure. If you're a student, you can actually enroll for Azure for Students, which will, among other things, get you $100 in credit over 12 months. You can access that at aka.ms/A4S. If you're curious about Git, you can check out git-scm.com to download the utility and start reading up on how it works. If you're curious about Python, you can always check out python.org. Now, if you happen to be attending local Hack Day, please come say hi to us. Inside of the Slack, you're going to notice there's an Ask Microsoft channel. Please come on by, say hi, ask questions. We want to talk to you. So with that, again, my name is Christopher Harrison. My handle is Geek Trainer. I hope that you learned a little bit about cognitive services and how to incorporate this into your application. Thanks a lot for checking this out.